Something quite telling occurred in America recently. There was a woman looking after her child at a play park, and I think the kid had a spat with another kid or something, and then she was filmed by a black man, and she said the word that is the worst thing you can do in the whole of Western culture, the word that if you utter, there is no coming back from. Yeah, she dropped the N-bomb. And when the guy filming her said, "Are you sure you want to go down this road? I'm filming you, I'll send you to the world," she dropped the N-bomb again and again and again. Now, to be clear from the outset, I'm not keen on any racial slurs. I don't think there's any need to be cruel to anybody. Why I'm covering this is because the response to this has been quite different from what we used to. Now, of course, there has been many leftists and angry black folks on social media saying, well, this is America, KKKA, it's always been this way, you know, they're all racist and terrible and life's pure hell for any minority that isn't an Anglo-Saxon wasp. Whereas the response would normally be the outrage plus people just saying, yes, we're terribly sorry and we're all awfully racist and this woman will have her life ruined forever because she deserves it. Yet instead, people have raised around $500,000 for this woman, with her aim being $1 million in order to protect herself against the legal challenges that are going to come her way. Now, I'm not making any statements as to whether this is right or wrong. The point I want to make here is a theme I've spoken about on this channel before, and that's that we're at the very root of an emergent phenomenon in which people across the Western world are recognizing that the multicultural dogma isn't really true, it's an illusion, and reality is much more tribal. Again, not saying if this is right or wrong, it's just a harsh reality of the present world. And if you do spend much time on social media, especially Twitter, you will see there's a lot of violence from certain groups to certain other groups, and that's generally ignored by the mainstream. And in fact, when these things do go public, very often you'll find certain groups will be happy to defend even murderers. Of course, I'm referring to the recent case of an Austin Metcalf, a young lad who was stabbed in the heart by a Carmelo Anthony, a young black lad, because Metcalf had asked Anthony to move out of his chair and they had a minor tussle. Now, after that, over $500,000 were raised for Carmelo Anthony's family, and this was a wake-up call to many people, showing that the multicultural dogma doesn't exactly tell us the truth about how many people feel about the supposed post-racial inclusive society. It seems that most races think in a heavily tribal manner, and if you notice this, of course, you will be told that it's your fault for being white and oppressive, and they wouldn't do so if you weren't. But that excuse is starting to run dry because white folks have been trying this for decades now, to live in this post-racial way in which everybody is seen equally. As I've said before, it seems to me that most Western people were quite happy to try and embrace Martin Luther King's dream. But over time, and after decades of ethno-religious celebrations for other groups and how wonderful their collectives are, people have started to think, hang on, white Europeans are just seen as this kind of neutral, bland negative. You know, if you explore a collective identity in that regard, it can only be expressed in the negative. If it's ever positive, it is a problem. And of course, you can always find some nutcase with a tattoo on his head screaming about white pride and foaming at the mouth, and that's enough to keep most people in line and thinking, oh, I don't want anything to do with that. But it's becoming clear as more people flood into the Western world and as we're supposed to celebrate their collective identities, people are starting to think more tribally themselves as they see their own homelands and their own cultures are starting to disappear. So while the mainstream will use this as fodder to show how evil white Western people can be and how they need to get on their knees and pray for forgiveness to the progressive overlords, in reality I think it's a symbol of many people in the West thinking all the more tribally because they're sick of witnessing violence that the mainstream doesn't care about. And it does make me wonder how the mainstream are going to deal with this, because they have to maintain the multicultural illusion. I mean, maybe they can ban voices like mine who are noticing this, but I don't think that's really going to stop what's occurring, because they've overplayed their hand. They've pushed identity politics so far, ignored violence going in the other direction so much, that there is a bit of an awakening going on right now. And to be clear again, I'm not pro any violence or slurs towards any other groups. The point is, the liberal system has created a tinderbox here and it's going to get out of control. And as I've said before on this channel, if you want to create this post-racial utopia where everyone gets on and holds hands and doesn't notice any difference in one another, fair enough, that's a nice aim, but you're going to have to do some hard work to get there. First of all, you're going to need it to be popular amongst all people. If it's not going to work. Second of all, in the words of John Lennon, who I may think is a leftist idiot, but he is right, you're going to need no religions. Christians, Muslims, Hindus, they're all obviously going to greatly disagree. And if you say they all have to agree for the sake of diversity, then you're just telling them to be liberals, which is a form of liberal political authoritarianism. And that's before we've even got onto the issues of potential social and group differences, as well as if the people coming here are actually going to get on board with the ideology anyway. But remember, all of this is a moot point because it's all just a front for the wants of money power anyway. As is a common refrain on this channel, while it's led by leftist ideology, beneath that is the wants of the market that wants to promote a mass immigration into the Western world to undermine national unity, and therefore a nation doesn't have the will to stand up to the wants of globalism. Second to that, it can also enforce a low-wage class that can come in from the third world and undermine the native working class. Now, if you notice what's going on, you will be called evil and a racist, or even extreme, as the AfD has been recently in Germany, even if you're a hippie soppy socks like me deep down. And that's my point. I'm a Christian hippie deep down. I want to spend my time reading Meister Eckhart books, but it's quite evident to me that the liberal system has created one hell of a mess, and it's getting out of its own control. Anyway, these are more stories from a fallen world. If you're interested in spiritual and personal transformation like me, you can check out my channel down below on it. Other than that, do consider subscribing to the channel if you're new, and enjoy the rest of your day.